Alright, so got a bit of a late start, but hopefully that means I have fixed the microphone issue that caused my last stream to be entirely useless. So hopefully that's fixed. Let's just get right to it. So you guys didn't see it, but last time I streamed I started working on this. It's what I'm calling the Barracuda. It's a long-range missile launcher, but it's got legs. So I've gone through and I've kind of done a little bit more tweaking since then. Well, since none of this you saw anyways, but since the stream I've done a bit more tweaking, worked a bit on the back legs that I was still kind of at odds with, and kind of started adding a few more little detail parts here, there, and everywhere. So we still got all the clearance we need here. That's nice. Kind of fleshed out this area a bit. I'm thinking I need to change something in here a bit. I'm not sure how much I like that, but well, kind of comes to that. But overall, got a good start, so let's just keep going at it. Now, unfortunately, because my last stream kind of completely didn't work out, that means all my introduction and everything also didn't work out. So you guys might still not know anything about me. If you've followed me through my Flickr account or from DeviantArt, you've probably got a good idea of the stuff I've worked on, or at least seen some of it, I'm hoping, and liked it as well. Oh, sorry, just want to tweak something real quick here. Yeah, yeah, there we go. But you know, at the end, you still kind of gotta go over everything again. So this is what we're gonna be working on. But first, let us just hop over to talk a little bit about what proxy war and this project really is. Because it's something I've kind of been working on and off of for over a year now. And it's basically this. So it's pretty much, it's kind of thing that started off work as a mod for a game, and that kind of ended up falling through, but I really like some of the designs I had done for that before that fell off, and so I took those and I just kind of expanded around them. So started off with stuff like the Bulwark and the Hailfire. These were kind of two that I really enjoyed, along with the Cougar and Fusillade. The Cougar and Fusillade. But, you know, it wasn't very well rounded, so I needed things like a light tank, a medium tank, tank hunter, artillery, deployable artillery, bots, commanders, aircraft. So started slowly working through all that, and now proxy war has been kind of like this thing that's been sitting in my head for a while. I've been kind of doing models on and off when I've been kind of inspired by something in particular, like with the Tremors. After playing some World of Tanks, and I found the tank that I kind of liked using even though I wasn't any good at it, and so I kind of wanted something that felt very similar. So I designed a tank with a giant laser cannon, made it low slung, and then called it a tank hunter. And you know, that's the kind of thing that it just kind of wasn't really planned, but once I started working on it, I just didn't really stop until it was done. And that's kind of the fun about all this, is you can just create something, and as long as you can fit it in with everything else, hey, go for it, right? But as you can already see here, there's quite a bit more of these than there is of these or these. And why is that? Well, honestly, tanks are just easier to design. They're more robust. They're all that. They're easier to design. There's no weird animations taken into account. You just got to worry about the turrets and any other little doodads you've got, like the deployable legs and stuff like that. So it was a lot easier, and that's just kind of what I started with. And honestly, it's easier to design for as well. Not from you know, in terms of ideas or whatnot, but in terms of like, how do you make it work? Because on a tank, it's easy to put on, you know, give things like secondary turrets or smaller stuff like that, even though none of these have that yet. But compared to the mix, like, you'll notice that there's a lot of symmetry, you know, 2 missile pods, 2 grenade launchers, 2 artillery cannons, 2 little blasters, 2 autocannons, 2 plasma guns, and that's just kind of one of those things where it's a lot easier to do, where it's harder to come up with extensive mechanical mech designs like this without really being able to think about it. And I've had a few ideas that I haven't really started working on yet. I mean, obviously, this is kind of all I've got done so far, so there's still a lot of work to be done overall, but there's some ideas like for a mortar mech, whereas kind of just like everything was localized in the central pod with legs coming out of that. So there was no turret per se, there was just a central pod. But I couldn't find a way to get that to really look right while still being easily printable. So I kind of left that to the side for now, and I'll come back to it at some point. But, you know, that's just kind of where things lie, as it were. So I'm working on mechs. Wanted to kind of expand that a little bit. There is definitely a few things I can still fit in here, and I've definitely got lots of room in aircraft. Aircraft are one of those things where I might be changing. I don't know, some of these feel a little big, and I'm not sure how much kind of room for expansion that gives me. Because like here, you know, we've got some smaller stuff. Actually, I think, yeah, the Cougars are smallest. And when you compare it to, you know, the Bulwark here, which is our big heavy tank, that's a pretty notable size difference. That's something that's pretty easy to pick up on. But, you know, like these 2 bombers, you know, they're pretty similar. They've definitely got their differences in terms of silhouette and overall shape, but they're a lot more similar than, say, like, you know, these two. So it's something I'm thinking on still and might come back to it. Commanders, or as I call them, the proxy core units, they are just, you know, they're a lot more complex, and I've definitely got a bunch of ideas nicely fleshed out now, and I've been just kind of waiting for the right time to dive back into this end of it, because it is a much more involved process compared to these guys. But I've got like a good 3 or 4 planned out in terms of, you know, basic looks, not all the backstory, but a little bit of backstory, a little bit of thought into the weaponry and special abilities and all that stuff. So I'll get to that, and that's probably something that's, well, it's something I'm going to be doing on stream along with working on the rest of this stuff and other projects as well. So that's kind of where Proxy War is sitting at right now. So we'll just hop back over to our Barracuda, and we'll just kind of plug away at that for a little bit. So this is kind of going to be not really a counterpart, but a companion to the Rapier, which is also an artillery-focused unit. It's going to be, whereas the Rapier is a bit more of a mobile artillery, this one's going to be less mobile. It's going to be slower to move, slower to maneuver. It is going to still be mounted on, I do still have it mounted on a turret with pitch and yaw, so it's going to be good in a defensive position, but not so much offensively, simply because it can't keep up and it's going to slow down the rest of the army that's there to essentially protect it. It's still usable in an offensive, it's just going to take a bit more work for it. So I kind of worked out a bit on how I want the basic leg shape. I'm thinking I'm actually going to, for simplicity's sake, make these two a single shape with no joint between them. Throw the joint up here and up here, so you still got 1, 2, and 3 sections to get a fairly smooth animation with. Gonna have to round out a little bit in here. Got these, this. Alright, so I'll start tweaking on some stuff. In the meantime, I'm gonna get that going, because it's pretty much what fuels me every day now. This can Dr. Pepper and water sometimes when I'm feeling lazy. So me. So pretty much the mechanical stuff has always been like things like mechs and giant robots and all that. That has always been of interest to me, and it's and it like I'm sure for many others as well in North America, it kind of started off with Gundam Wing because that was kind of like just one of those shows that it was kind of one of the few things that really focused on it. There were lots of shows that used it, like Power Rangers had that kind of stuff, and a little bit of here, there, and everywhere. But it was really Gundam that kind of said, "This is everything we are about," and that's that. Other shows use it as kind of like a kind of kind of like a finale. Like we've done all the other stuff, now we pull out the giant robot, and still cool and all that when you're a kid because pretty much you know what isn't cool when you're a kid. But it's as I kind of like started growing older and being able to really figure out the stuff for myself and kind of really explore my interests, I found it didn't really do it for me anymore. So Gundam really kind of filled in for that. And pretty much kind of since then the rest is kind of history. It's all very like basic stuff. But up until around 2000 and I guess it'd be about 2002, 2003. I was in my final years at middle school, so grade 8 and 9, and the school I was at actually offered a very basic, considering the grade and what was available, a very basic 3D animation program. And so I took to that and spent a lot of time in the lab. Unfortunately, back then we didn't get spare blocks or anything like that, so I didn't get to spend as much time as I would have liked, but I definitely crammed in as much as I could. And, and at the end of that, I did pretty much, my animation was based on giant robots and there was fighting, and looking back to it, it was, of course, absolutely terrible, but it was something that I had made, and even though there were still, even then, things I did not like about it, I was very aware of the fact that it was still something I had made and not something that someone else had made. And that kind of gave me the kick and kind of got me to look at it from that angle. It's like you can do this. You don't need to wait for someone else to do something that you like. Just do it yourself. Now, of course, this is not quite pre-internet, but it is still very like, internet wasn't even a decade old yet, so it didn't really go anywhere for a while. There was more 3D courses that I took in high school. Unfortunately, at that point, it was still pretty new to the high school. So I didn't really I don't want to say it didn't really do much, because obviously I did all, the coursework and stuff like that, but it didn't have that aha moment. It didn't show me something new about myself or anything like that. So from there, that kind of just, it kind of solidified what I already knew and kind of helped push me, because I ended up going to a local college for 3D, and although ultimately it was not the best decision I've ever made, it did allow me to pretty much it got me to the point now where I can happily do it as a hobby, and all things considered, you know, essentially it's a much longer story for another day, and in the end, regardless of the outcome of that particular instance, I don't really think the effects of what happened were really all that negative. I mean, here I am almost we're about 7 years after the fact, and I'm still doing this stuff. It's still for a hobby, of course. I've not really been able to do quote unquote anything with it, but you know, it's still my stuff. It's not me copying something else or anything like that. So honestly, in a lot of ways, that's good enough. And so that's kind of where we still are. And lately, in the last few years, I've really started to kind of get in the mindset of I want to go like the next step. I want to do something beyond simply making the models. I want to use them for stuff, and that stems from 2007, which just so happens to coincide with the release of Supreme Commander. Although I don't remember. Let me look this up real quick. Because I'm not sure. No, that's not the one I wanted. But pretty much Supreme Commander also had an expansion pack, which happened sometime in, I want to say 2007. Here we go. Supreme Commander was, okay, sorry, they were both in 2007. If I'm recalling this correctly, then the original, or the core game, Supreme Commander, was released in March. And then we got Forge Alliance near the end of 2007, so that'd be like September, November. But yes, pretty much that kind of kicked off a very big project where I worked on a mod that initially just started being like, let's just make ideas and just implement them, and found a coder who I ended up working with almost exclusively throughout the entirety of my modding career on Supreme Commander. And we just kind of ran with it, and what became of it was Supreme Commander Black Ops, which at the end of what we ended up doing, because after about 7 years it was only 7 years of working on it, on and off as a hobby around everything else that comes with life. It is pretty much like it is the equivalent of a new expansion pack for Supreme Commander. And it's to the point where we, as closely as possible, of course we weren't perfect and we had to do things as we got good ideas for them, but we added a roughly equal amount of units to all the factions. We spread them out across the entire tech tree instead of focusing on a particular area. We used what we added and with minor tweaks along to existing units to improve the diversity between the factions and introduce new mechanics to them. In particular, for example, the Seraphim faction, they got what we call the Lambda fields. And they acted as a type of shield, but instead of simply, blocking damage and absorbing it, it would sometimes redirect it. So, in addition to protecting from damage, it would also deal damage. And there was lots of little tricks that went in with there, and so as part of that, we needed some way to not quite counter it, but to help reduce its effectiveness in some ways. So for the UEF, what we did is we gave one of our new units essentially a giant plasma chain gun, similar to its Tier 3 defense turret. And that worked well in conjunction with the Lambda fields, because the way the Lambda fields work is that they had a set number of emitters that would redirect or destroy shots. So the more shots you had, so one emitter per shot, and then it would have a certain cooldown and all that. So the more shots you had, the more you could quote-unquote overwhelm the Lambda field. And then other things like beams completely ignored it. But beams are Cybern's thing, so we couldn't just pass those around too freely. But overall, that's something that I worked on for a good portion of time. And at the end of it, it kind of came to the point where we kind of couldn't do more, and well, not that we couldn't do more, we definitely had more stuff we would have liked to have done, but it's definitely kind of one of those things where eventually kind of life gets in the way more often than not, and that's kind of what happened. Is I had a bunch of other things I needed to work on. I was moving and just dealing with having to work to pay all the bills and all that, and our coder had similar issues dealing with having to deal with life and all that stuff. So in the end, we just had to stop working on it. It's still, if for those who are interested in it, it's not available through the Games Workshop site, or sorry, not Games Workshop, I'm thinking of 40K, through Gas Powered Games, because their forum has been pretty much gone for a while now, unfortunately. But it is still, you can still play it through Forge Alliance Forever, which is great. You can search for that. It comes with everything. It's pretty much a fan-created client for Supreme Commander. So matchmaking, lobbies, mods, maps, it's all in there. Definitely worth checking out. I'm definitely going to play some Supreme Commander Black Ops on the stream because that's, essentially my heritage. But and for now, we're just going to kind of keep it simple and just do some art. Kind of give you guys a bit of a chance to get to know me first. And so, yeah, that's kind of like, that was where kind of the drive to actually do something kind of started from. And it's kind of been in remission the last year or two. I've definitely had ideas, like I've got 2 ideas for board games that have kind of slightly developed I need to get back to. I started, and did a bit of world building around some of my Lego designs that are going to be I'll be uploading over the next week or so slowly onto my new DeviantArt account, which will be listed below, kind of right below the screen, at the bottom of the stream here. And so, done a little bit of things, but this year, now that it's kind of the new year, and what's better than arbitrary flip of the calendar to actually start doing shit. And this year's the year I'm going to start kind of like really acting on some of those ideas. So I'm doing this stream is kind of like the big one. Started doing this, gonna help share all this, use it as a driver for me to actually work on stuff, because that's always been a problem for me, is finding the motivation. So now here, hopefully twice a week, I'll be streaming art, playing a few games here and there, but I'll be streaming art and just working on stuff for at least an hour or 2 every stream, and that'll be kind of a huge step up from some of the times that I used to do, where I would, sometimes go weeks without even opening my 3D program, never mind actually, getting anything done. I've done a bit of writing. Now, I am not a writer by any means. My vocabulary is kind of not great on the big stuff. I don't know really a lot of the core principles on how to write well, but I'm just gonna write. And yeah, the other weird thing about when I write is that I get some really weird time dilation. Like, I did a big chunk of writing first week of January, and I didn't write a lot. Like, I wrote about, I think, 1,500 words, but I would notice that, like, literally hours would just slip by without me even noticing. I remember looking, even though I've got the clock right in the corner of the screen there, I would look at it, it's like, oh, it's 12:30. The next time I look at it, it'd be like 2 o'clock, and I'd be like, it didn't feel like any time had passed at all. Obviously, I was making progress on the writing, because I still wrote something. So, but it's a really weird feeling to experience, kind of like firsthand like that, and hopefully next time I get a good solid chunk to sit down and write, I'll be a bit more aware of it and try and keep myself a bit more on task and get a bit more writing done. So I've got kind of one short story on the go. It's not actually proxy war related, although I do have some writings for that as well. That's not in a story format though, so that probably won't be kind of quote-unquote coming out anytime soon. It's more so focused on the world building aspect. But even so, I mean, it's definitely some writing that's going to come up. I am working on the one current short story, and although it is not going to be directly linked, I also have plotted out a second short story that takes place with similar characters but in a different spot on the timeline. I don't have a fully developed timeline quite yet, but I do have, a bunch of rough characters that I kind of think I like the look of. So I'll work with those. I think the idea is pretty swell, and I think you guys will like it. Well, I'm sure some people will like it. But I just kind of gotta sit down and do it, and writing's kind of one of those things that's always been a little tough for me to... That's not gonna work, shit. A little tough for me to kind of really dive into. But it'll happen, and should be fun at least. That's not what I wanted. There, perfect. So hopefully I can, actually I think what I'm going to try and do is, within a week or two, I want to finish that first short story and get that posted up and kind of shared around. So fingers crossed on that. It's going to be probably pretty tough for me, but, kind of like I said, this year is the year of doing shit. So that's going to be part of it, is just pushing myself on it and getting it done, because that's kind of the problem. Is it doesn't matter how many projects I start, if I can't finish any, more is not going to help. Let's see what else we got going on. Damn, that's actually a problem, isn't it? Okay, so we're going to do this instead. There. That's better. And actually, at this point, might as well just kind of go whole hog on it. And alright, what else we got going on here? Well, not much going on here per se, but is that crooked? No, okay, I messed up somewhere then. What else am I working on? Well, like I said, I've got the 2 board game ideas I've kind of put some time into. There's admittedly not much to show for it. I've got kind of a roughly working prototype of one, and the other one I haven't touched for a year, and I've actually fairly recently gone back to look at it and been discussing it with myself, and we'll be almost entirely redoing that, figuring that out. The first idea was for of all things, a racing board game. Not unique, but I think an interesting enough concept, so hopefully I'll get the chance to really sit down. What I really need to do is I need to get together with a bunch of people and run through the game with a group of people, because the intention is for it to be played with, a large group of people, like 4 to 6 players at least. And, I've done some testing with myself and another player, and that works, and it's not shown me if the game itself works, but it showed me that kind of the mechanics I want to use work on a kind of like a base level. So that's something at least. I just kind of gotta get off my butt, find a group I can play it with, and then just play it a bunch, play test it to hell and back. So that's, something else to work on. What else? The other idea, which actually at this point might be kind of moot, was kind of like, I guess roughly speaking, it was a form of revival of Battlefleet Gothic. Now, Games Workshop has recently announced that it wants to bring back several of the specialist games it had killed unceremoniously, but we don't quite know yet exactly what that'll entail. We know that they are working on, I think they are currently working on Blood Bowl, which is kind of self-contained as a board game in of itself. Not to a huge degree, because it is a bit more, from my understanding, a bit more complex than what some might be expecting, but it's there. But yeah, we don't know what that means for a game like Battlefleet Gothic. Does that mean it's going to be pretty much the game brought back with boxed armies. Is that going to mean that it's a new game that just happens to use new models that are going to be compatible with the Black Battlefield Gothic type rules? We don't know yet. So I'm kind of just letting that sit for a bit. That is the one that I kind of went back to after a year and looking at it, it's like, I need to fix everything. So I'm going to let it sit for a little bit. I think the ideas I had some flashes of inspiration on how to improve it, so I think I'll kind of sit on those a bit longer, see how they pan out mentally for me in my head, and then go from there. I think there's some merit in it. I just need to kind of make sure I got it all figured out in my head before I go too deep on that. Then what else am I working on then? Saying that a lot. It's probably not good, but unfortunately this is all still kind of new to me, so you're gonna have to put up with it. Actually, how long have we been going so far? Well, we've been going for about 30 minutes. I will take a short break. I'll end my recording and start a new section. I hope to be able to get all these onto YouTube. I'm not sure how much the whole editing process is gonna, if that'll be more work than I can really put into it while keeping everything else up, but I'm gonna take a look at it at least. So we'll take a short 5-10 minute break. I'm gonna get up and stretch, drink a bit of water, then we'll come back and keep working and hopefully keep talking. So I will see you guys soon.